Hi. So, how is everybody doing? We're excited to be here. Okay, so how many people have been in, so just because for being here, just to give me a good idea, how many people have been in business longer than a year? How many people have been in business longer than 2 years? 3 years? Okay, cool. That's kind of my usual cutoff. All right. So what we're going to talk about today, I like to know where you are because I like to know how much we need to kind of speed through. But I always like to start by saying, okay, these are the few things that everybody really needs to do to get your business like actually out the door and running. Because believe it or not, I can be giving this presentation to people who have been in business for 10 years, even 20 years, some people almost 30 years, and they have not done some of these steps. So when we are starting a business, we're gonna blow through these. If you have questions, please ask them. But 101, what do we do? First thing I want you to do is pick a business entity. I really like to recommend forming a limited liability company of some sort. LLCs, we know them, we love them. Corporations are a good option too for some people, it might depend. But usually we wanna stick with that LLC if it's your first business. There may be some reasons to go into corporate, especially if you are like a rentals company or you have a lot of physical assets. Maybe you're looking, and assets means stuff. It literally just means stuff. Like, don't get it twisted and think it's something exciting. It might be worth it to talk to somebody, but if it's your first business and we're not really sure what we're gonna do, you might wanna err on the side of filing an LLC. Why do we like LLCs? They protect you and your stuff, like your personal stuff. The analogy that I really like to give people is that LLCs are a bubble, like bubble soccer. Has anybody ever seen bubble soccer? It's like the game where you just run into people and you're just like, if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it when we get back to internet because it's very funny. So your LLC kind of does that for you. It protects you and your house, your car, your stuff, as long as you are not running into something super sharp. And by super sharp, I mean things that can actually pop that bubble of protection, like commingling your funds, which is a fancy way of saying paying your business expenses out of your personal account and personal expenses out of your business account, which is like the biggest no-no. It's also a real pain for like CPAs and accounting, so just don't do it anyway and it'll make your life suck less during tax time, because we all love that. It was extra long this year, so fun. If anybody actually turned your taxes in on time, good for you. Good for you guys. I turned it in when it was due. Don't commingle your funds, don't mix them up. Always pay for your personal rent for your house out of your personal account. Buy your cameras out of your business account. It's just easier for you. The other thing that's gonna pop that bubble of protection for you is something like fraud. Like if you're just being real sketchy and trying to defraud people or trying to evade paying stuff or any of that stuff that I know nobody here would do, but I just like to throw it out there, that can pop that bubble of protection, and we don't like that. So if there are more than one of you in your organization, say is there more than one of you? No? Okay, well if there are, it is very, 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 very important to have an operating agreement or a partnership agreement in place. That is because it's like your business prenup. When your company stuff goes down the drain, everybody loses their minds, people turn into brain-eating zombies, your partnership agreement is essentially going to shepherd you through that divorce on terms that you both agree to, so nobody feels like they're getting the wool pulled over their eyes, and so nobody feels like, put off because you agreed to these terms at first. I can't stress how important it is. I do business divorces, AKA like business liquidations, unfortunately frequently. And they are just a big bummer. It's like a divorce, it's awful. So please, please, please do those. The next thing you need to do, you always need to get your EIN, your tax identification number. Even if you don't have employees, it's employer identification number. Even if you don't have employees, you need to get that. That will also allow you to, if you're buying supplies, if you are buying stuff for your company, that tax ID number helps you get wholesale pricing. Like you can apply for wholesale licenses and you might not have to pay tax on it. For certain things that you're repackaging, maybe you are, putting stuff in bundles and sending them, I don't know, whatever. But you can get tax relief on that. So that's kind of nice. Next thing I want to just touch on really quickly is DBAs. And this is a step that a lot of people miss. It's a doing business as, also known as a trading as, or a fictitious name filing. In my state, they call it a fictitious name filing. Now, if you are a corporate entity or a limited liability entity, like I was talking about before, technically that means like you're safe, right? Like you got a shield on. But you need to tell people that you're doing business with that you do have that shield, so they don't think that they're just working with you personally, right? Because if they're working with you personally, they know like, oh shoot, well if stuff goes down the drain, like I can just sue them and get all the money from their house and like it'll be cool. But if you're a limited liability company, they can't do that because you have that bubble. And your responsibility as a business owner is to tell them that. So you technically have to disclose that you're a limited liability company. I don't know if in some of your contracts you've seen, like in the very beginning, like, you know, Susie Photographer, an LLC formed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. We're a Commonwealth here, right? Still? Thought so. Virginia is too. That's just a way of disclaiming that. So technically, when you are writing your business name down, you are supposed to be indicating that, comma, LLC, comma, Inc., whatever it is, every time you write your business name down. That's ugly. Like, that's straight up ugly. I know it's ugly. You don't want to have to say LLC every time. So we have these things called doing business as, fictitious name filings, and it's a nickname for your company. And you file that, and you can drop that LLC, drop that Inc., all that stuff. And it is, most of the time for people in the wedding industry, it's purely for aesthetics. Like, it is purely for aesthetics, and I know that. But it's still very important to do. Final thing I want to talk about in regards to all the corporate work, the dry stuff that we want to like throw ourselves off a bridge about because it's so boring and just annoying. Make sure you are yearly making all your maintenance filings that you need to be making. That includes your taxes that are due, obviously. We know that. We keep track of that. We know it's a big deal. But it's also small stuff like paying your state corporations division or state we call it the SEC, but there's also the corporations division of like multiple different states. Make sure you're paying them yearly. It's usually like between $50, $100. If you're in California, it's very expensive. It's like a couple $100, but keeping that registration up to date. But also making sure you're keeping your addresses up to date because, and this is why it's important, if you get sued or subpoenaed, which you may get subpoenaed, maybe not necessarily for a case against you, but a case against one of your clients or one of your contractors or people that work for you, if you get subpoenaed and that subpoena it goes to your company, your corporate address. If that corporate address is not updated, that subpoena is not getting to you, you're not showing up to court and there's a warrant out for your arrest because like you skipped out on court, so don't do that. So that's why it's important to keep all of those filings up to date. Now, that was really fast. I blew through that. Does anybody have any questions right now?
I have a question.
Yes.
About sole proprietors.
Yes.
Versus LLCs.
Perfect question, I'm sure.
I'm a sole proprietor, but I have business insurance that covers my business.
Yeah.
My studio.
So there's a difference between, the question is about the difference between business insurance and LLCs. It's kind of interesting because your insurance is going to cover your company in the way that like we know insurance covers it. The LLC will cover you personally. I don't know how to kind of draw this out because it's two very different things, but they accomplish kind of a similar result where your business insurance will protect you and your business stuff. However, if there is something that your insurance doesn't cover, you still are personally liable for that. If you have an LLC, you can put insurance over your LLC. So first of all, the insurance would cover all the stuff for your company. Then you'd have the LLC, and so anything that wasn't covered by your insurance would get covered by your LLC. And then they'd have to go through, they wouldn't be able to reach you at the bottom of that. So like, technically your personal assets could still be used to satisfy something that your insurance didn't cover. If you are just a corporate entity, they wouldn't be able to use any of your personal assets whatsoever. So they're similar results, but kind of different outcomes, if that makes sense.
Transition from a sole proprietor to an LLC.
Super easy thing to do if you're by yourself. Obviously, I always need to say like have a lawyer help you, but if you are by yourself and it's a singular person in a business entity, you can probably file that paperwork yourself. You go to your state corporations division online. Usually it is an online process. You can punch it in. I don't like LegalZoom, the way that they upcharge a lot, and it's still confusing, so I would recommend doing that yourself. There are usually with your state corporations division, there is instructions that go along with it. If there's any more than one of you in a company, don't do it yourself. Have somebody help you with it because it gets really confusing and very risky. Okay, so we don't have a ton of time today, so I wanted to let you pick your own adventure, and whether we want to talk about like trademarks and copyrights, because I know that's important, especially to photographers, or because we're just coming out of COVID and it's still a disaster, do we want to really hit hard on contracts and then how that works? So I guess we can take a vote on it. Trademarks and copyrights, raise your hand. Contracts /COVID / all that stuff. Raise your hand. Cool. All right. I figured that might be a thing. All right. So the most important part of your job and being in the wedding and event industry, you are living in contract land. And that has become really, really important lately because with COVID, we're all just like, what is going on? How does this all turn out? So when I am working through contracts with people, so for my day job, I am your regular, fun law firm person. My night job, nights and weekends, is I run Engage Legal. It's a blog, it's a template shop, all that stuff. If I am at my law firm job and I am walking through a custom drafted contract with somebody, it does not matter if that person is just starting out their business. Maybe they are like a wedding planner that hasn't done has done a couple events on the slide, but they're like really getting into it. They're getting their contract done. Or if I'm doing a master service agreement for a company working with the Fortune 500. There are certain things that we are going to hit no matter what we do. They are always going to be things that we touch on. And that is always going to be who, what, when, where, why, how many, how much. Every single time. And those are those journalism words that I don't know if you remember when you were in like 4th grade and they were like, we're going to write a story, you need to tell us all this stuff. These are simple questions to ask, but they lead to so many other very, very critical questions. And so when we talk about who, you always need to know like who is providing what service and who's actually involved in this contract. I always say get both of the individuals, like get both of members of the couple on the contract. And unless their parents or the person that is paying for it is like super, super, super adamant about being on that contract, don't add them as a party to the contract. Because if anybody is signing that contract and is a party to the contract, they have the ability to make changes. So maybe you have a couple who wants one thing one way, the mom of the bride, maybe she's really excited and wants things another way. She's telling you one thing, they're telling you another thing. Well, who do you listen to? Technically, they're both under the contract. So in this situation, it's better for you to get a third-party payer agreement or have the mother of the bride or whatever as a third-party payer instead of part of that contract. So you can see like the easy questions turn into harder questions. What services are you actually providing? And this is where it gets hard for some people because yes, you're providing photography services, but what does that actually mean? Like, are you going and like photographing aerially? Are you gonna show up and take 2 hours of pictures? What does that mean? So when we say the what, they can kind of fill in, we can flesh this out and go deeper and deeper based on the other questions that are in your who, what, when, where, why, how many, how much, but just really start thinking about like, okay, well, what services am I actually providing? Like if I am a photographer, am I doing just the shooting? Am I doing just the editing? No, I'm doing shooting and editing, and we're doing an engagement shoot, and I'm doing, detail shots and blah, 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 blah. So get as specific as you can. I know that it can be difficult when you're trying to like say, well, I don't know if these are going to be available to me. I don't know how many photos I'm going to get. Like I'm not asking you to get that specific, but really try and dig down and say what it is you're providing them, because if things go wrong, we need to be able to point to things and say, like, we gave you this, our contract says this, and this, we gave you this, and this. Our contract says we were gonna be there for 8 hours, we were there for 8.1. It was your fault that your wedding party was 2 hours late. Like, we did our job, you can't sue us for not fulfilling our contract. So those are the reasons why we like to really, we as lawyers really like to push you towards those kinds of things. Whens are really important, especially if you're just starting out. I feel like you can get yanked around a little bit more. So always putting like the hours that you're gonna be there. You're not leaving later than this time, you're arriving at this time. If you're just saying, oh, I'm providing wedding day videography services, they could be there until 1 a.m. And are you supposed to be there until 1 a.m.? Like, you kind of only budgeted until this amount of time. Your babysitter's only staying until this late. So you're now incurring costs because there wasn't some sort of clear expectation set about timing. If you do have to go over, what does that hourly overage charge look like? And I think that when we start getting into these little like very specific things, some people are like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna scare off my couples. Oh my gosh, they're not gonna know. I think, and at least from the perspective of I'm in the middle of trying to book a wedding, well, I'm not actually planning it, I'm pretending to plan a wedding. We're still lazy and haven't done it yet, but looking at contracts that vendors have, I like to see that they've thought of these things, because I'm like, all right, well, if they're thinking these things through, like they are thinking other things through, right? And I think when you are moving, especially as you move up into upper tiers and upper echelons of shooting, they want to know, or shooting or providing services, they want to be able to see, okay, this person has a well-drafted contract, they thought of these things, I know that I can count on them for X, Y, and Z, so therefore I can probably count on them for all this other stuff that hasn't even happened yet when things hit the fan, because they inevitably do. Where can be very important if you are traveling, which I know you travel a lot. So a couple things about traveling. Make sure you are discussing what happens if the event gets canceled or postponed, and what happens to your finances, like who's booking the trip, who is that on if things get canceled or postponed, and then all of the like flight change fees. Because I tend to fly Southwest, which when I can, which there's usually not like a flight change fee, but like American Airlines, which Southwest is amazing. Yeah, I love it for Southwest, but I fly out of Richmond. I was complaining about them last night to somebody, probably you. And I was like, I don't like to be negative, but dang, American Airlines, I hate them. They will charge you for everything. Like you sneeze too loud and they'll charge you for it. So if your couple is changing their event, or like maybe where they're not allowed out of the country anymore and neither are you, so we have to cancel stuff and reschedule, you could be incurring thousands of dollars in change fees. So we got to put that up front. I also like to disclaim, like, always try and book your own travel. I have horror stories of photographers that they shot an event, things went kind of weird. The couple canceled their flight home. Don't like that, don't love that. Also, if you are a younger, especially if you're a younger female, book your own hotel room if possible, because if somebody else is booking your hotel room, their name is on your hotel and they could possibly get into your hotel room. I just get protective of people, so be careful. And then how many and how much? These are two kind of, again, these measurable things that are a little bit hard to nail down. How many things you're providing. If you're a planner, you can say how many mood boards and how many revisions are you providing? How many tablescape options are you providing? How many layouts of the room are you providing? Because if you have to move from point A to point B, or it's raining outside, is that included that you're gonna provide a rain plan as well and decor for that? If you're a photographer, I'm not saying, don't say I'm gonna give you like 50 photos or blah, blah, blah. But you can look at things like albums, like how many revisions, if you do albums, how many revisions are you providing to them? Because you don't want to be stuck making an album for like 3 years, and then the mom wants an album after that, and now you have to do that. So just get really, really specific on what you can do there. Now, let's talk about COVID, because that was a kind of threw a wrench in a lot of things for everybody and made everybody think about our contracts more. So first, let's hit on the big thing, is postponements, right? Usually, if you have a well-drafted contract, there's gonna be something about postponements in there. There's also probably gonna be something about force majeure in there. We're really probably past the point where force majeure matters in the COVID situation. A force majeure event is usually a very narrowly described situation where there is a complete prevention of performance of somebody actually doing their job under the contract because of one of like an enumerated circumstance. Usually government mandate is under there somewhere, acts of government, civil unrests, fire, flood, tornado, hurricane. I'm on the coast. We love hurricanes. We are pretty much past that because it's stuff that's unforeseeable. Now we know COVID exists, so we have to plan for the future. So what we do instead now is technically what I have been doing to kind of balance it out for both sides is to literally just put a clause in the contract that says, all right, if COVID happens, here's what's going on. Here's how we're gonna do this. If it is a government shutdown where we are now shut down again, the government says nobody can have events at all, we're stuck, nobody can have an event over 10 people, nobody can do X, Y, or Z. We write that out in the contract and say, if this happens, you can either postpone at no cost to a later date. Sometimes some people wanted an upcharge if it was during like heavy season, not heavy season, but during like wedding season or like busy season, and there was somebody in the off season and they were trying to move to busy season. Like, was there an upcharge there? We would talk through that. Or it was like you can split up into a 2-hour elopement and then like a 4 or 6 hour reception. That was an option. Then there was okay, well, we're in the middle of COVID. I'm still not comfortable. I don't feel good about having Great Aunt Sally travel across the country. Half of my family's older. We want to postpone. That's a very different scenario, right? Because we don't have the government or like these kind of out of our hands, unforeseeable shutdowns that we had in the beginning. So these options look more like a traditional postponement as far as I'm concerned for most of my clients, because this is something that we were aware of when we wrote the contract, because now we know that COVID's existing, right? Every contract we sign from now on, we know that pandemics are possible. They are foreseeable for us. So a lot of my clients want their clients to feel like they have a game plan and that they will be understanding, but also not completely have their whole 2021 booked out. So we're saying if this is a COVID situation and you're not feeling comfortable, or you test positive for COVID, because that could happen, here's how we're gonna handle it. These are the dates that are available to you. We agree to a mutually agreed upon date in the future. If you don't cancel before 60 days out, you owe us this much. If you don't cancel before 30 days out, you owe us this much. If you call me the day before your wedding and say that your husband's testing, or your future husband's testing positive for COVID, you're gonna owe us this much money because we've already done some scouting, we've done some work, we've planned, we've done this and that with you. However, we can move your date to another date and time. So really, this takes a lot of, and this sounds very dramatic, but this kind of takes a lot of soul searching about okay, what does my business feel comfortable with? And what do I feel like is a fair option for my couples? Because obviously we're in a very touchy-feely industry. It's very personal. It's not your traditional sale of widgets or I don't know, pool liner sales. I don't know where I came up with that, but there's a lot of feelings involved, and that's part of why everybody's involved in this industry, right? It's because there's feelings, but we also have to be very careful with those feelings. Now, you also need to evaluate the internet exists, Yelp exists, Facebook exists. So do I feel comfortable with this being my backup plan if I know that I may get pushback on Yelp, on Wedding Wire, all of that stuff? Because, if somebody does push back, if what they're saying is true, you can't get that taken down. That is just true, that is free speech, and they won't take it down. If somebody says something like, oh, they, ate my dog, that would be something you get taken down because it's not true. But a lot of times those reviews are gonna stay up. So you need to think through, as a general option, what am I giving my couples? And then you need to have a backup plan. So we've got our general thing that we're putting in writing so that everybody knows that we all agree to. But then you're gonna have those couples or those clients or those whoever that are gonna be a pain in the butt. So you need to have a pain in the butt backup plan ready for them. So that's your second option. So think through that and what that looks like and have that ready to go. And one of the things that I say for these really difficult conversations like that, make sure you have a script written up and ready to go so that you don't even have to think. You don't have to say oh my gosh, what should I say here? How do I phrase this? When you are clear-minded and you're not in the middle of a very traumatic and probably stressful event, think through what you want to say and how you want to say it, because it's so much easier. I've been through legal situations myself. I'm hitting this thing. I've been through legal situations myself where my mind was not clear because I was in the middle of it and I couldn't see the other side. So I know what it feels like when you're like, this is the end of my world. And really it's not. So it's better to think through these things when we are clear-minded. Does anyone, I want to leave a little bit of time. I know I'm coming up on the end of things, but does anybody have things they want to talk through about COVID? Or contracts in general? I'm happy to talk through them. I know that we're sick of talking about COVID, but we also still kind of are in the middle of it. Anybody? Okay. Does anybody have any questions generally about legal that we didn't have time to touch on during this quick 30-minute rapid fire session? I unloaded really fast on you guys. So what I want to say, closing remarks, I guess. What I'm going to do is I have my notes that I've been looking at right here. I'm going to finish typing them up. If you had any questions, I was going to add those to those. I might add a couple more things, a couple things about trademarks and copyrights, just so that you are aware of them, so you have them to kind of flip through and know oh yeah, that's just a reminder. And that way you can flip through this when we get back to the real world and you have some time to digest. I know that a lot of times when we're at conferences or taking courses, it can be a lot of information and it goes in one ear and sometimes out the other ear, half of it'll get stuck and the other half just falls out somewhere over here. So look through that when you're done and we will email it to you in a PDF. If you have any questions, you can find me at engagelegal.com, hello@engagelegal.com, or on Instagram at engagelegal. I'm much better at responding on Instagram. But that's it. That's our 30 minutes. Rapid fire.